session is being recorded. I would like to welcome our three guests for today. First, that would be Andy Browning from the Uppsala University of Sweden, where he's a project manager at their innovation office, and used to be a director of innovation at the EIT. Welcome, Andy. Hi. Okay.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Great. As a courtesy, please make sure you're muted as you enter, so that there's no disruptions in this discussion. Second, of course, we have our Professor Dr. Fazilet Vardar Suka. I'm hoping
you can just say Vardar. Yes.
Vardar, that's great.
Yeah.
So, well, it's great to have you here. You spent a lot of time. You're actually a researcher, and you're now in charge of a nanotechnology research and application center. But you also used to be very much involved with the technology transfer collaborations or industry university collaborations beforehand.
Yes. Correct? Yes, I'm still involved. It's a parallel life.
Oh, it's a parallel life. That's great. So you know what, I will let you all sort of talk a little bit about your experience throughout the process of asking questions. This is just for a really short introduction. And then last, well, maybe I should have first introduced myself. I do apologize. I'm a moderator for today. My name is Giga, and I am part of the DRIVE training together with Roel Kamerling, and also a lecturer at the TU Delft Center for Entrepreneurship. That being said, we had our third guest is our very own Paul Althuis. Paul has been the director of the Innovation and Impact Center, which is more than just really a simple technology transfer office, and we'll probably get a little bit into that. But for now, I'd just like to welcome Paul. Hi, Paul. Are you here with us?
I'm fine. Thanks, Alex, and good luck with moderating, huh?
Excellent
session.
Yeah, it's a very good session. So we'll see. So we'll see how it goes. So, but you know what? I've sort of provided a few questions ahead of time, and we've assessed what are some of the interesting questions that our audience wants to hear. And our audience is risk hubs across EIT Health hub collaborators that are working on either engaging students in entrepreneurship, starting companies in their regions, or just more broadly helping innovation in their ecosystem, even for universities. And that's why I think this is very, very pertinent to them. Now, one of the topics that was really most interesting is when we talk about, okay, there you go. I'm going to mute you right there. Okay, sorry about that. So when we talk about technology transfer, of course, there is no transfer of the technology if there's no technology. And the technology is mostly provided by the university researchers. And so my question to you guys, and I think because, so my question is, what are the most effective ways to approach and collaborate with university researchers when it comes to turning their research and their technology into innovation? So because Fazilet, you were working on both sides of the aisle, maybe you can start answering that question. So what is the best way to approach researchers as a technology transfer office?
I think, first of all, every research institution, may it be a research center or a department, has to have some sort of core staff who are interested in technology transfer or who are in charge. So every request from stakeholders, from industry or other institutions abroad has to go through this node and disseminated to the academicians. Similarly, if a researcher has an idea that can be commercialized, it has to go through this business team, because we need to face the stakeholders with a professional look, an institutional approach. If the academician and the industry get in touch individually, then this institutional approach is lost somehow. And sometimes other agendas become apparent, and we lose focus in the commercialization road map. So first, we need to find out what is the type of partnership? What is the type of collaboration that's sought? Either this could have been initiated either by industry or the academician. What are the requirements? And then a special roadmap has to be drawn out, and appropriate partners should be sought and matched. And this should be done by, it could be one person or it could be a small team. In our center, we have a core team of business people, commercialization personnel, and everything goes through that. So an NDA is signed if it is appropriate. If there's an MOU that needs to be signed, everything is in the form of templates, is available to the academicians. So this is the procedural, the logistics. The other thing is, I think the academicians have to be trained. They have to have a different type of mindset if we need to prepare them for an industrial collaboration. Because as you know, 30, 40 years ago, research was very straightforward. A researcher went into the lab, did some research and published results, and that was it. But now we are facing a paradigm change, and this needs to be transferred into the academicians individually and into the academia in general through maybe seminars, trainings, or special talks, so that there is a third dimension of creating societal added value.
So Fazilet, if I can summarize, essentially what you're saying, first, you have to have a sort of an office that both professionally engages the researchers and sort of set in the institutional framework of the university, and which kind of makes their life easier, so to speak, so deals with the NDAs and all the logistic parts. But secondly, you're saying some sort of training needs to be provided for the academic researchers to help them through this process. Can you maybe first maybe a question to Paul? Do you agree with this? And if there is some sort of training that ought to be done, what do you think are the most important parts of this training for the academic personnel?
Thanks a lot. Yes, I agree with what Fazilet was mentioning on your request. What is important, I think, to add to that is that more and more our researchers, at least I think in Western Europe, are used to try to get subsidies in which public-private partnerships are a key. So in a way, I would say there is not much anymore on the pure fundamental research subsidies anymore. That's at least what we face in the Netherlands. Second to that, at least from TU Delft perspective, there are quite some alumni working at the different corporates, and they know, in fact, the scientists. So there is also an informal way of contacting between corporates or industry and the university. So I would say we are not that much focusing on training how to cope with industry. Of course, what we train our researchers is to pitch, and that's maybe an interesting also relationship to stimulating entrepreneurship. I think more and more our researchers they need to be trained to pitch their idea, whether it's for research purposes or for research industry collaboration, or together with with people in their group to start a spin-out company. Thanks a lot.
So Paul, if I could add to, so what you're saying is basically when it comes to the training, one of the important things is to be able to communicate your ideas to whoever you're trying to get as a collaborator, be it another industry partner or a spin out, or just purely an investor or a grant proposal. So Andy, can you add to that? Generally, what has been said thus far?
Yeah, so I'll just preface a little bit by explaining a somewhat unique situation that we have in Sweden. So unlike most of the universities in Europe, researchers at Swedish universities actually own their own results themselves. So it's not something that we as a university own. And that basically influences the whole of our ecosystem, all the support mechanisms that we provide. I think one of the key factors for us in terms of building relationships with researchers, because a lot of this is around building strong relationships with our researchers, is that the people that we employ at the Tech Transfer Office or the Innovation Office have a strong research background themselves, so they know where the researchers are coming from, but they also have an industry background. So you have this kind of dual role, so you can bridge between what's inside the university and what's outside the university. And that's really been a key factor for us for getting this, the acceptance within the university, but also the acceptance outside. And as I said, a lot of it is about building relationships. I think if you look at our tech transfer activities, I would say 80% of what we get coming through comes from relatively few research groups. They're big research groups and they have sort of a lot of applied research. So you're going to end up focusing a lot of time on a relatively few research groups, but that's okay because you can use them as your messengers out to the wider research community. The other thing that I think we've seen in more recent years is our researchers have actually asked us to get involved in a whole bunch of other activities. So we go out and take part in their educational programs. So we help train their PhD students, for example, in IP, in understanding where the sort of the benefits of their research could be applied and things like that. And that also helps us develop the relationships with the researchers.
Yeah, so I think what was really important that you mentioned is that now when you're thinking about a technology transfer office, you have to understand the regulatory framework in which you operate, and that will completely change the way you will position your tech transfer. But something interesting that you said that I really want to get, continue on, which is that you said that 80% of technology transfer, if I understood correctly, pretty much comes from a few research groups. So in a sense, there's a couple of very proactive, there's several proactive research groups, and they can tend to kind of account for most of it. Fazilet and Paul, is that the same experience is that something you also experience at your universities, that most of the technology transfer comes from a minority of research groups?
Yes, in my experience, it's the same, because if you look at the academicians or researchers, some of them are bound to be working in basic research. That's the way they are. And some disciplines like mathematics and fluid mechanics, they're very theoretical. So in that case, it is by the nature of the subject, they are also not commercially involved unless it is within a cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary group. And some researchers are more into training, into education, into lecturing. So they have their own interests. So it is a little group who is active. And generally, it is a culture led by their supervisors or by their mentors, by their group leaders. And that group also always leads to commercialization activities.
Great. Paul,
Yes.
you're coming from an engineering school, so you have presumably less basic science happening. So do you still experience that most technology transfer is still coming from a minority of research groups?
No. With us, the situation is less black and white. I would say there is, of course, also at a comprehensive engineering university, there are differences, that's clear, but the differences are not that great. And also in relation to what I have said earlier, is that in our subsidy landscape, the trend is that you need to focus on public-private partnerships. So even for the mathematicians, now they have to take into account that they should attract private partners in order to obtain funding. So yeah, that's the way the things are, well, being developed at the Dutch side. So yes, there are differences for sure. There are, but and the situation is a little bit different than with Andy and Vasilet.
And then, yeah, so again, it comes to so Paul, if you can stick around for a second.
Yeah.
So there is, again, what Andy's saying, think of the regulatory framework, but what you're also saying, which you also mentioned previously, is think about the sort of the not only regulatory but policy framework, because now you're seeing that there is the grants, the subsidies, so the government's decision is to move closer to the application, and when it comes to these industry collaborations, and pay attention to what is happening in your own country or in European Union for that matter. But my question to you is now that you say that is not really the case, is in most of the cases, do the research groups approach you, or do you approach the research groups to initiate that first sort of meeting or the first idea of potential technology transfer?
Yeah, we organized ourselves in the way we operate today, I think some 15 years ago. So we have invested in that. So at this moment of time, I would say it comes from both sides, as well from the researcher, as well from our office. There should be no border between them. So it's even if we are what we call an interfaculty center, the faculties should approach us quite easily, and the experiences shows that's also that's in fact the way we operate today. So if we see chances, we go to the researcher comes to us in order to get assistance.
Okay, so a very proactive role, I would say.
Very proactive. That's the only way we can do our work properly.
Understood. Andy, you're nodding. Do you have more to add to this?
No, I think it's what we've seen in the past, and I think what Paul was saying about the way finances are starting to move towards more applicable research funding. I think we've seen that in Sweden. I think we see that in the EU. In terms of approaching researchers, so because they don't have to come to us, what we typically find is that they'll come to us if we can offer them something that is of interest. And quite often that is through we have a large intellectual property group that can help the researchers develop their IP, do some basic IP understanding, look at the landscape there. And that's usually quite often the first interaction that we get with the researchers. The other thing that we've seen that is really quite helpful is actually having a little bit of soft money to help the researchers develop their idea a little bit further. So it could be, we can help you put you in touch with a patent bureau, and we can finance that a little bit. We can put you in touch with someone to do a kind of a market research to understand if there's a market for this kind of application. And that really brings the researchers to us in terms of we have something to offer them to help them on their entrepreneurial journey. But what we've seen in the past is if we go out and market our services too hard, then the researchers say, yeah, I think I've got something in my bottom drawer that might be interesting. And you realize actually this is not something to work with. So it's really a fine balance between pushing them really hard to get something and wanting them to come to you because you have something to offer.
Yeah, I think, and that's what Paul was mentioning. It's a two-way street. It just does not go, you can't push, it cannot be only you pushing them and pulling them. And then on the other hand, it cannot be just them coming and saying, because there is, and there's, I will continue on this topic of soft money, which is interesting, but it seems like that because of the different system, they come to you for services, and IP is one of them. And you said maybe some soft money. What is the other most coveted type of service that the researchers come asking your help for?
Yeah, so we have quite a big group that works with developing collaborations. So we get involved in some of their bigger projects, and that's also a good source of our stuff coming out. So we can go in and support larger EU collaborations where there's multiple partners, go in as an innovation officer. So that's also a good source. The other thing, I think, knowing that there are people within the university, and the way I sell this to our researchers is, look, guys, you've already paid for us. whether you've used it, whether you want to use us or not, you've already paid. So you can use us as much or as little as you like. But what we can provide you, we have business experience, we have networks that can maybe help you on your journey. Further down the line, we actually have a holding company would do investments in startup companies together with you. So that's also in a kind of an attractive way to guide the researchers through the system.
That's very cool. So just to switch gears for a little bit, there's something Fazilet mentioned, which is about the culture of the researchers. And I think one of the question, maybe Fazilet, you can go first, is to sort of say to those that do want to engage in technology transfer, what do you believe are the core motivations behind that? Why do people decide they want to? Why do researchers decide they want to really engage in this, or not engage?
I would like to point out that I am representing a research center which is government funded. So this is not a university, although it is at a university campus. So we are organically tied and collaborating very closely. But our funding comes from the state, a similar model to Fraunhofer institutes. So we are designed to collaborate with industry, create some sort of revenue from contracted research, and our KPIs are focused on industry collaborations and commercialization. So a researcher, if they want to be employed here, they need to fulfill these KPIs. So there is a motivation. That's one motivation. And because of our objectives, because of our mission, industry comes to us with different problems. Some of them could be troubleshooting, some of them could be some R&D, or some of it could be a blue sky research, depending on what the situation is. So in that case, we have to find the right team from the center and from our affiliated researchers. We have a large network of affiliated researchers from different research centers, either locally or internationally. So we formed this international or cross-disciplinary group and come up with a proposal to the company who is looking for it. So this is for contracting research. And there is a lot of incentive for it, both institutionally and also individually, because that's our KPI. Another thing is there are some special funding mechanisms that are only allocated to centers like us in the country. And these are pre-competitive research platforms. And we have already been successful in forming one pre-competitive research platform involving 24 institutions, 8 academic and 12 industrial companies. And we are really proud to say that it's been over a year now. And all of these institutions have agreed on one single governance model and also a single IP sharing constitution. So we are now coordinating 16 different research projects under this pre-competitive research platform. In fact, it is related to health, diagnosis and monitoring of health data through sensors and so on, which nanotechnology is involved. Of course, in that case, both academicians and research institutions and industry comes to us because they would like to be involved in these pre-competitive research platforms. And the funding from the government is substantial by Turkish standards, like something like 8 million euros for 4 years and so on. And by Turkish standards, this is quite high.
So in your words, if I can summarize, because it is not always easy to find research around, to find funding for research around. This is just a great way for researchers also to be funded by a large institution, like the government in this case. But Fazilet, then let me ask you this: this is a very interesting model. It is not really spinning out necessarily. It's not transferring technology out of the university. It is a center that is dedicated to be creating technologies that will have this industry relationship. But you are sort of tied to the university. And can you tell us what are the main advantages that you get from being connected to a university?
it is not one university. We need to collaborate with lots of different universities.
Oh, very good.
But this is a node here on nanotechnology. We collaborate with different academic institutions. We also collaborate with industry. So we actually provide a platform, like a dancing platform, that everybody comes, floats in, gets what they want, and then they go. And because it's a pre-competitive research platform focusing on TRL 3 to 6, everybody can take their homework and go and commercialize this at their own expense or with further collaborations. So we are actually transferring technology, but at TRL 6-7.
Yeah, which by the way is the most expensive TRL. So that those TRL levels are the most expensive ones generally. But that being said, does the dancing floor include startups or
Yes.
most of the startups as well? So maybe then a question for everyone across the in what you observe in Uppsala, in TU Delft, and in Schaban, and well, at this research center, at the dance floor of the, I like the metaphor, so I'm going to use it. What proportion of the technology transfer is in a big company, corporation collaborations, as opposed to spin-outs? And in what trend is that moving? So maybe Paul, you go first.
Thanks a lot. What we see is that likewise the system what Andy was sketching, we also have a holding called Delft Enterprise. They are fully focused on assisting spin-out companies in the very first early and difficult phase. So while we have a dedicated team there, we see quite a growth of spinning out companies at TU Delft. It is difficult to say what's the proportion because it's quantity, and I would say I can say something. What's the proportion between funding by industry vis-a-vis the funding from public sources? I would say that's roughly 70% is public funding, 30% is private industry funding. That's the proportion I can say. It doesn't make much sense to give a proportion between the industry funding and the spin-out companies. What is definitely helpful also, again, and it adds to what I've said earlier, the fact that we have spin-out companies does help us to attract public-private funding, because they see that as an asset to attract funding, because they see the application where we are working on. So that's the situation, I would say, at Delft University.
And do you, together with the researchers, decide what is the appropriate channel to move the technology, either through licensing it to the IP or via spin-out?
Oh, yes. Researchers are always involved. But I would say, taking into account the way we have programmed things, is in the end, they take our advice very seriously. So I would say we always come to a conclusion, what's the best way? But for sure, we play quite a prominent role in that. All
right. So we'll come back to this. Andy, I think now it's time for me to pick on something you said earlier, which is that soft money. We just heard from Paul about the proactive role of them taking when it comes to the creation of spinouts. And because now I really do want to maybe focus a little bit of attention on the spinouts, on the startups. Part of the thing, of course, that Paul said is, first we create a strategic, we help them with a strategic direction of whether that ought to be a spin out or something else, or a corporate innovation. And then there is some soft money. Andy, can you, there's the Delft Enterprises, of course, that the arm that provides provides investment for spin outs. Andy, can you tell us a little bit about, in your case, what is this support from the university, from your office is for the startups, and can you compare it to what Paul just mentioned?
Yeah, so I think one of the other legal frameworks that we work within in Sweden is that the universities aren't allowed to take any commercial risks, which means that we can provide support to our researchers, but formally as a university, we can't provide support to the startups. So what we tend to do is we work with the researchers as much as possible and say, look, we can give you as much support as we can. We've got soft money before you start a company. Once you started a company, then that really is the domain of the holding company. So the holding company is quite separate from the university, even though they're very tightly linked. So as soon as that company is started and has started generating investment or revenue or whatever, then the university basically leaves the scene, leaves the dance floor, if you like, and hands it over to the holding company. So it's really quite a fairly tight borderline for us because of the way the legal stuff is set up in Sweden.
But is there other services you help the startups with aside from IP and this a little bit of pocket money to start exploring the idea for the startup?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of helping the individual researchers, then yes, we can provide them with training. We can sort of help to shift their mindset a little bit, but it's focused on the researchers rather than in that case, rather than the actual commercial idea. But we, our advice to most research is, as long as you can run this idea, run this project, generate value without getting external investment, do so, because then that will increase the value of the company, de-risk as much as you can. So when you do start a company and you do start bringing external investment in, you have a much higher valuation on that compared to if you started a company straight away and then tried to do some of the de-risking. There's also quite a bit. So our innovation agency in Sweden called Vinnova, they do a lot of work financing directed at researchers in this phase. So they have programs for startups and programs for researchers, and we can provide quite a bit of support in understanding how to jump through those hoops and get access to that kind of financing as well.
Understood. So also the way so the help could also be, we don't give you, we don't give you the fish. We try to help you to teach you how to fish, so to speak. Is that you're helping them try to raise funds for their projects.
Absolutely.
Through sort of services of consulting and so on. So Fazilet, at your research center, how do you support startups? Is there any product, just a framework that you have over there?
The legislation is similar to Sweden. We are not because we are state funded, we are not allowed to risk state money. So we cannot put money per se to the company once the company is established. But we have a proof of concept fund for the researchers to develop their ideas further. And also we have a unique practice. We have an e-store where researchers can actually put their products. It's like a virtual incubator where they can test their products in the e-store, get some customer feedback, end user feedback to modify it and reiterate and maybe mature it before they can actually establish their company. Once they are at the stage of establishing their companies, then we assist them to secure some state funds that are targeted for startups. This is for internal ideas coming from our own researchers. We also have another program called Spin Sunum, where we have made an open call to startups of different origins from different universities who are working in nanotechnologies, and we had 38 different applicants, and we have selected 5 out of these, and these are now our adopted startups. We provide them access to our research facilities, so they don't need to establish their own R&D facilities to validate their results and to do analytical services and so on. We also provide access to our network so that they can get investors, they can find maybe new qualified employees and so on. So that is how we support the external innovation ecosystem through the facilities here, so that we create some sort of an ecosystem, some sort of a wave to motivate everybody.
That's very cool. So I think this topic of an ecosystem, we'll get back to that in just one more second, Paul. But while we're still at the topic of startups, and we already spoke a little bit about Delft Enterprises. So, and this is where I want to, just introduce. So, Paul, you're director of the Innovation and Impact Center at TU Delft, which is more than just a simple technology transfer office. So can you tell us a little bit of what are the roles that the INI does to help the spin-out companies? And I know it's not just setting, handling just the IP. It's just more than that. So can you briefly tell us a little bit about that? And what would be really interesting to hear is what have been some hard lessons learned in trying to help with academic spin-outs.
Thanks a lot. What I've heard from both Vasilat and Andy, I think the differences are not that big between the three of us. Of course, we have maybe a different environment in which each of us chooses its own way how to optimize things. At our side, we started with trying to get teams on what we see, Dutch funding, EU funding, and corporate innovation, business relations. Those were the three pillars to start with, to attract funding from the outside world, together with a specialized IP team within our office, and a team dedicated to also to manage multi-stakeholder projects, and that's also all still on the funding side of the spectrum. But I think from our perspective, we put quite some attention to set up specific field labs around our university. And those field labs, they form what and you will come back to that later, an essential part in our innovative ecosystem around the TU Delft campus, in which for not only startups, but also for small and medium-sized enterprises, the entrance for specific subjects is far easier than to approach the university in general. So amongst others, we have a robo house, we have a green village, all on our campus area. Maybe related to something Vasilat said earlier, she has an e-incubator, I would say. We have a physical incubator, and I would say I would also pay some attention to the team you're working for, Alex, and I know Victor is also in the call. At our university, we have a Delft Center of Entrepreneurship, focusing especially on students at bachelor and master level to see where are the possibilities for them to become an entrepreneur. And that's, I think, also a very important step in order to establish such a entrepreneurial and innovative ecosystem. So we have an incubator at our premises called Yes Delft, and there we train students, PhDs, or external people in order to, on their competences, to become an entrepreneur. So I would say that that's also part of what we see as to create this ecosystem. You asked me also something on the lessons learned. Yes, of course, you make mistakes. And when we started, it's natural that not all became a success. But what we have tried to do is learn from those mistakes and see where we can optimize things. To give an example, in the early phases, we hired external business developers in order to assist researchers in order to set up their spin-out company. That they did more or less the major stake in all spin-outs. After a couple of years, we came to the conclusion that that was not working well. We should pay more structural assistance in these cases. So we built up the team with Delft Enterprise, where you have people who can also assist people, assist scientists in order to create a spin out. And of course, we still hire sometimes, but on special cases, an external business developer, but the majority of work is done internally. Saying that, we established also at this moment, we have some 70 spinouts under our holding. So we created also quite an established network with funders, with people, alumni, in order to act also proactively in this respect. So that was part of the lessons learned, but also part of the further development of the innovative ecosystem.
Great. So Andy, can you also comment on some of the lessons learned in your process of setting up the sort of the help for the startup community?
Yeah, I think it's I think Paul was alluding to it. It's understanding how you can bridge between the research and the business, and having your own internal people, I think is really critical in that. One of the things that we've also learned with our holding company has kind of been a key to the success of the investments that they've made, is that they tend to take on companies in a very early stage and mature them and grow them. But what we don't do is, when we have external investors wanting to come in, we don't try and defend our stakes in ad nauseum. If we get external investors coming into our companies that are providing a good evaluation, a good return on investment for worth, we're quite happy to get diluted out, because it means that we've got more capital to invest in the phase that other investors won't come in. That's not the same approach as some of the other holding companies in Sweden. You'll see some of the others will actually try and defend their stakes. And what that means is particularly in the field like life sciences, where I come from, you have a lot of money tied up in companies that you can't invest and you can't get access to put into your other startups. You end up in a position where you're just sitting there waiting for hopefully something nice will happen to one of your companies, so you get some money back out and you can start reinvesting again. And that's an approach that we've deliberately gone away from. As soon as there are external investors wanting to come in and put some big money in, fine, dilute us out. We're more than happy to keep our shares if you want us to do that. And that means that we can invest in areas where other investors won't go. And I think that's the key role for us as the holding company, is to do something close to the researchers of the university that no other kind of external investor, whether it's VC or whether it's angel investors, will come in and do.
So so when it comes, I really like the comment about having internal people. It's kind of, if you want something to get done, do it yourself. You have your own institution, do it. But just to clarify one thing, when you're saying a holding company, that holding company is separate from the university. So that's very important to note, right? Yeah,
exactly. So it's a very watertight barrier. So the university can't put money into the holding company, and they can't take money out either. So it's kind of an evergreen fund. It's a very strange, very Swedish construction, I would say. So it's the holding company is not owned by the university, but it's just controlled by the university.
Yeah, well, maybe not just in Sweden. Look, these were all very interesting comments, I think, and there is one topic that I'd like to focus now on, and this is something. So if we think about Fazilet's Research Center, if we think about what Paul was saying about the field labs, which are sort of the centers, I kind of think of it as a metaphor. Is like you put a flag here and says, this is Robo Valley. This is where we are developing robotics. This is nanotechnology. This is sort of a place, a node, a hub, where we're just kind of, trying to attract all the stakeholders in. Now my question to all of you, and Andy, I'm just assuming that some sort of thing exists in your realm too. Although if it does not, I think that you can still answer the following question. But we'll start with Fazilet, and that's the partners that are so relevant for your field, for your center to work. So one of the partners that you said was just a network of universities, not one university, several universities. But who are the other important players that you are collaborating with? And of course, we mentioned the government because that is the one sponsoring the project. But who are the other important players that you need as collaborators for the good performance of your research center? Oh, you're muted for a second, sorry.
Sorry. First of all, large companies, of course, we need all these, the large holding companies, and there are three main holdings in the country: Sabancı Holding, Koç Holding, and Eczacıbaşı Holding, and they are in competition, but we are collaborating with them, which is, I think, very significant. SMEs are important because they have a special niche and they provide services to a certain group of people. And of course, startups. But in addition to that, we need to work with service providers like industrial designers, lawyers, and some NGOs, so that we have a holistic and integrated network of stakeholders that can put in their bit when the necessity arises. I would like to define the ecosystem as interconnecting and interacting parts that are working in harmony and synergy. So we need to have this approach when we are identifying our stakeholders and inviting them in as our strategic partners. They have to be different so that they complement each other in their specific expertise, but they also need to operate in an integrated manner so that there is harmony and a seamless support. So in one word, I would like to say that we need strategic partnerships in a seamless form, so that when there is a need, there is a partner we can request assistance and he can step in. That's how we identify them, our strategic partners. We can't.
You're muted now, Alex.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So why are Faisal, so you're mentioning all this, the really a holistic approach to having a lot of stakeholders come in, but how do you get all of their incentives aligned? So in terms of, for example, corporations, why does a corporation participate in your center, and how would, for example, a corporation participate in the activities of your center?
I think it's a win-win situation. First of all, they have access to funds. They also have access to other networks because everybody needs friends. So this is a neutral platform where they can collaborate with their competitors in a pre-competitive phase. And for instance, we have an automotive company in a project which is designing diagnostic kits and healthcare monitoring devices. And you would think that an automotive company would probably not be interested in that, but they are. So some of this is such a basic technology, a pivot technology, so that many different applications can actually spring from that and flourish. So they would like to be in the middle, learning what the new developments are in that specific sector. Another thing is they would like access to young researchers who are, new postdocs, talented human resources. And then because we have this pre-competitive platform, they have the first right of refusal to jointly develop technologies. So that's also an attraction. They get to know what's being developed and they can take it from one point and maybe develop it further, mature it further, so that that is a product for their own company, inspired by a relatively early stage TRL 656 level research that originated from the platform and from this collaboration. So we have a wide range of sectors who can actually put in their ideas and their effort in here.
Yeah, so what's interesting to say is, but can we agree that the win-win situations are necessary, though? You have to find a
Yes.
reason why, absolutely. So, and
Obvious.
this is obviously, I mean, well, it is obvious, but this is something we really pay a lot of attention to, is to trying to understand the incentives and to find the win-win situations with the stakeholders in our hubs. But what you're trying to say is they can be found in a very, in very places where you might have never looked for.
Yes.
And I like the example of the automotive industry being interested in the nanotechnology, but,
Yeah.
but it's interesting.
I would like to just underline one thing. We are rather practiced in this because for EU partnerships, we also have to provide some sort of a value so that we are in the EU consortiums. There is a value proposition from a country like Turkey, because we have some unique assets that we can provide. Similarly, we apply the same approach to big companies, small companies. Everybody has to define their own value proposition so that a win-win situation is created.
Very cool, very good. Thank you so much, Fazilet. Andy, so you've heard Paul speak about the sort of that TU Delft has, for one, an incubator, a physical incubator, that there is also an education service, the Delft Center for Entrepreneurship, that they closely collaborate with to help with the entrepreneurship education. How do you see that at your own university? So are those two aspects also present and necessary? And also, are there any other ones as important stakeholders that you'd like to mention that are relevant for your work and the work of your office?
Yeah, so we have an incubator here in Uppsala called Uppsala Innovation Center, which together I think with Yes Delft is ranked sort of top 5 in Europe, that we're very proud of, and that is a key factor enabling our startups to grow and really change the mindset of researchers. Because what I think you see from a lot of research projects and researchers in academia, you tend to get a technology push, and what the incubator will help you do is actually twist that around and try and understand what is the customer pull and try and match those. And I think that they're excellent at doing that kind of thing. I think that they are a real key player for the whole region, because they don't just take startups from Uppsala University, they take startups and ideas from the Agriculture University, they take startups and ideas from companies who are looking to branch out and things like that. So it becomes a really nice melting pot of ideas and experiences with the groups that we then work with within the incubator. We don't have a center for entrepreneurship across the whole university, or it's something that's currently being discussed. The entrepreneurship tends to be driven a little, sort of for students at least, tends to be driven through the different disciplinary domains. I think it's something we're probably going to slowly move towards, because it becomes such an integral part of education there for all students, that offering has to be there. And I think having it sort of centrally located makes an awful lot of sense. One of the other key stakeholders for us as a university in doing this kind of work is actually our local regional government. And they are really interested in helping the university to pick up and drive economic growth within the region and really put the region on the map. So there are a number of areas where they've identified which are key for where there's a strong research base, there's a strong industry base where we can make a lot of sense to work together in advanced manufacturing, in life sciences and stuff like that. So they actually become a key player for us, not just in terms of financing, but actually as a kind of neutral platform to help us develop those kind of long-term collaborations with their focus on the economic growth and things like that.
No, I think this is very important that you've identified local governments as an important player. I'm being aware of the time, which is 11:54. So maybe we did ask for the feedback from everyone in the back. So, but if there are any questions for our panel right now, there's one big question. If there's not, I do have more to go on. But anybody, any questions?
Hi. If I can just jump in quickly. Hi, Alex.
Hi.
Hello, everybody.
Very quickly, because we're at like 5 minutes.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I thought that it was okay.
No, it's okay. Go for it. Go for it.
It's because we are hearing about so many initiatives, and I'm amazed. I'm overwhelmed, and it is wonderful. But at the same time, it's for us. I think it's always very, because we have very limited resources, and we have to communicate to our stakeholders that whatever we are doing is worthwhile, and there are different type of indicators or different type of impact for different activities. So the result is that we are sometimes vacillating in, should we focus on students or should we focus on researchers and so on. So maybe if somebody can comment on this, how do you balance? How do you balance between this maybe long-term work with the students and the work with star researchers, champion researchers, which will bring the results in which we were hearing at the beginning? So that was my question. If
Outstanding question. So in the situation of low resources and so many things you can be doing, what do you focus on? What an excellent question. So who would like to go first?
I can go first because I think I'm an expert on doing things without any cost.
Excellent.
In this economy, I think we have to create synergies. For instance, students can be training, can go under a training program with a researcher and can help the researcher with a pair of hands. And while doing that, can learn a lot of tools and techniques and can be trained for entrepreneurship. So a special program for undergraduate students can be created like that. The researcher will have a new pair of hands, relatively experienced, third year, fourth year students. And the student will get some sort of training free of charge, for instance. Similarly, there are barters for industry. We do certain analysis for free, and then they provide us some services. So rather than exchanging money, certain barter type of services could be provided. Also, the facilities can be rented out to industry to create some revenue, because we do not use our labs 7/24, and there are idle times that they stay there. And if there is a special industrial company who would like to use a certain group of instrumentation, a special MOU can be drawn out and they can use it during off times and create revenue so that you can finance whatever I can be more creative, but I don't want to take time.
No, but
I think it is the initiative and the mindset. I don't think we need money that much. Money comes later. If we have the intention, the perseverance, we can create the right conditions to create revenue.
I think that's a lovely point. I really do think, and especially go and look, but that requires a lot of proactivity. And a lot, and I think what Andy was saying about the setting up local governments, setting up what Paul was saying, setting up field labs, taking care of the understanding the policy and the regulatory shifts inside of your economy, all that matters. But in the end, you can start from your very own. Paul, any other comments regarding to this, especially maybe of your collaboration with the local government, maybe in the last
minute.
Yeah, in the last.
Thanks a lot. I think also the region plays a role. Of course, likewise what Andy, but Fazilet and all others in the call, the local government is an essential part because they also look to employment growth in order to have a more prosperous region. So it's not the key element, but it is an important element. And what you should see is to make an estimation. Where are your key points and where are your weaker points, and improve the key points, because you have to you have to start somewhere, and the region in that way, but also local industry, take them into account. There are always options. That's where I would like to round off.
Yeah, there's always options. Just start, look for synergies, be proactive. This is what I'm hearing from the panel.
Okay.
Well, it is 11:59. So first of all, I'd really like to thank all the panelists for their time, for the 1 hour. I know we kind of crossed various different topics, but I thought It was a lot of great things to think about. And a lot, from the e-store, the e-incubator, to thinking, what your region wants, to what your researchers need, etc. So again, thank you to the panel, and thank you for all the audience that came in to listen to this talk today.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for inviting us.
Fazila,
Thank you.
Paul, and Andy, thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you very
bye-bye.
much.
Thank you.
You all, bye bye.